Welcome to today's episode of True to Form with your host, President and co-founder of Crystal Clear, highly regarded speaker, and two-time Inc. 500 entrepreneur, Tim Sawyer. True to Form is a podcast that highlights leaders making headway in the aesthetic, anti-aging, and elective medical industry. Learn from the experts to discover the secrets of success and pitfalls to avoid when growing all aspects of your elective medical practice. This week's episode is brought to you by Candela, a leading US-based global medical aesthetic device company, engineering technology that enables practices to provide advanced solutions for a broad range of medical aesthetic applications, including hair removal, wrinkle reduction, tattoo removal, women's health treatments, facial resurfacing, traumatic and surgical scar treatments, body contouring, improving the skin's appearance through the treatment of benign vascular and pigmented lesions, and the treatment of acne, leg veins, and cellulite. Please join me in welcoming your host, the authentic, the transparent, Tim Sawyer.
Hello and welcome to True to Form, the podcast that connects you to the people, technology, and hot topics that shape the elective medical community. Provided to you by Crystal Clear and brought to you by this week's sponsor, Candela, the leading US-based medical aesthetic device company. I'm your host, Tim Sawyer. To our returning guests, welcome back. And for our first-time listeners, we appreciate you joining us and encourage you to become a subscriber. In the last episode, we spoke with practice manager of Nashville-based Franklin Skin and Laser, Sarah Bengelsdorf, who unpacked how they took a small practice with just one employee and transformed it into a thriving business with 2 locations, 15 energy-based devices, 12 full-time employees, husband and wife team doing an amazing job. You've got to check, really cool story. You've got to check it out, guys. With all that said, we're bringing back a former guest who was one of the most downloaded episodes we've ever done. Today, we're going to be speaking with Warren Danforth, who is the owner of Spa 35 Medical Spa, which launched operations in 2006. He's an OG. He is a leader in medical spa marketing, non-surgical cosmetic technology. He is also a key opinion leader for Candela Medical. By delivering outstanding services, working with great people, and leveraging digital marketing, Spa 35 has earned more than 400 5-star customer reviews and created a reputation for excellence among its clients and within the aesthetic industry. Warren, welcome back to the program.
Well, thank you, Tim. I'm really looking forward to having a talk. We really enjoyed the last discussion, and I think we got a great topic for today.
We're going to have some fun. So for those of you listening and think I'm kidding when I put out a request to say, hey, if you've got a really cool topic for discussion in the aesthetic community, bring it to our attention, and we'll take a look at it and see if it works. Warren responded, because that's how his brain works, and he had one of the really cool topics that I've seen in 2020, and it's stop talking about the mills and start talking about the thrills. And before I ask the question, I want to remind folks, so the last time Warren and I were talking on the program, we had talked about what can manufacturers do more or create more, provide more in terms of helping the local med spa owner in this period of time. And Warren made a very good comment. He said, well, Tim, we need to speak less about bells, whistles, buzzers, gadgets, and we need to talk about the emotional appeal associated with the treatments being provided. So less mills, more thrills. Talk about first of all, how did you come up with that idea, and how have you started to walk that out in your practice?
Well, it's a constant issue for us inside the organization, Tim. As I look at our business, it's just so exciting because we've got customers who've got emotional events in their lives that trigger the buying process. And then we've got really smart providers who've got great clinical skills. And I see my role as kind of merging those two personalities and backgrounds into an appointment where the customer can come in with the emotional needs that they've got, be it a divorce, a promotion, a breakup, and then the clinical provider who's gone through all this analytical training to do the greatest service possible and come up with a way that those two parties can communicate in a way that both parties get their needs fulfilled. And that's kind of how I came up with this thrills perspective, because I think we've got a habit of talking to our customers from our own backgrounds instead of exploring the place that our customers are coming to us from.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the thoughts that came out of that was not only do we need to do just that, but the concept of doing it in a multi-generational way. So in other words, what appeals to a 20-year-old might not appeal to a 30-year-old and a 40-year-old and a 50-year-old. Have you thought about that much in any of the messaging that you're creating for the practice now? In other words, how to appeal to a different demographic?
Absolutely. So one of the key things that I never seem to get finished is to come up with kind of common recommendations for people by their demographics. So I mean, it could be older or younger, it could be Fitzpatrick type, it could be the aging process they've gone through. But I think we have this tendency to approach everything from a particular service perspective, and instead we should be approaching it from where the customer is in their particular place in life.
And one of the things that I've seen is, food for thought is at either on the homepage or at some place in the site, you'll actually have, cascading boxes. And the first one says, for those 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And then when they pop it up, it literally breaks down the recommended services and why in those pop-ups. And I thought that was a pretty neat approach to that. And particularly if you look at the breakdown of your practice. And so let me ask you this, actually. Through COVID, have you seen, in terms of multi-generational, where has the increase been back? Is it the same customer across all multi-generational? Are you getting more younger folks who are comfortable with COVID? That's a pretty good. Do you track that, I guess, is the first question.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously look at that all the time, and I do a lot of work kind of tracking where we're getting our customers from and kind of what they're looking at, and we seem to have kind of two ends of the spectrum right now. On one end of the spectrum is we've got the people in their late 40s, 50s, and 60s that want the higher impact services. CO2 surfacing, profound RF. Kind of the big, they want the big makeover. They're the ones that are working from home. They've got a Zoom face, and they're worried about the next promotion. They want to look good in their headshot for their next job. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we're getting a ton of hits on laser hair removal right now. So the younger folks, they're kind of in the, hey, this is not a big deal. I need my bikini done, and now it's a good time to do it.
Interesting. And Candela is right there to help. Right?
Absolutely.
One of the best laser.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're loving us right now because our consumable sales are way up because we're doing a lot more of the stuff that's got some consumables. So I think they're loving it. Yeah,
and if you think about the levers that you could pull, and this is a little self-serving to crystal clear, but if you think the levers that you could pull to attract patients, you could look. You've got site, social, email, text messaging, right? Those are the easiest ones to kind of glam onto. Can you give any, to the extent you're comfortable, any specific feedback on how you attack, if you look at site, social, email, text marketing, how you text delineating from those two groups, your process for doing, or the different various groups, your process for doing that?
I think I've got a different way to answer that question. So I just ran across a great video on YouTube that Google produced, and it's called A New Model of Consumer Decision Making. And it does a really good job of summarizing the process that our customer goes through when they want to make a purchasing decision. And it really aligns exactly to the way I run my marketing. So your listeners can Google it. So it's by a group out of Australia. So if they have a Google group out of Australia, they'll know they found the right video. But it talks about, customers have got a trigger that starts the buying process. And I mentioned this quite a bit, but on our side, it's typically something like a promotion, a divorce, a 50th birthday, kids are getting married and they're going to have the wedding photos. There's typically a trigger that occurs, an emotionally based trigger. And then the customer goes through this exploration process. And that's where I say you've got to be in front of their face if you're going to treat their face, right? So So when a customer starts to investigate a particular service, they talk to their friends, they get on their cell phone, they do search, they go on their social media. So you've got to be in all those places that your customers at when your customers are going through that exploratory process. And then kind of in sync with that exploratory process, when they come across something that's interesting, they go through an evaluation process. And I summarize the evaluation process with a formula. And my formula is perceived value is what I get for what I pay. And so in our business, we'll use CO2 as an example. If a customer is, in their 50s, right, they want to see if a CO2 is right for them, and they've got the formula, right? I'm going to get a CO2 laser. That's what I get, and what I'm going to pay is $5,000 or whatever your price happens to be. But the piece I think that many of us miss is the units of what I get are emotional benefits, right? So you don't get a CO2 laser, you get a better headshot for your job, or you look better on Zoom and you're more likely to get promoted, or you get a swipe right, right? So you got to have both those marketing components. You got to be where your customers are, and you've got to be able to turn your features into benefits that customers can translate into what it's going to do for them.
Interesting. And I think if you look at a typical website or a typical message from a typical aesthetic practice, it tends to be more generic. In other words, a broader based appeal, and they focus on the manufacturer name in the post that, I kind of get in trouble sometimes because not a lot of folks know Candela, right? Or any other device. They know you, they know Spa 35. And then the appeal, to your point, I love what you said, is that the buying process starts with an emotional trigger. And what you're doing is thinking through, and I give you a ton of credit, you're thinking through, okay, what are the emotional triggers for this customer in this age group, and what do I have in-house that I can apply to give them these benefits? That's a pretty good model. I mean, that's a pretty good model, Warren, when you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite sales books is Spin Selling, and I doubt your listeners will go in and read the whole book, but Spin Selling is my favorite sales model because it talks about what's the situation your customer's in, what are the problems your customer's having, what are the implications of those problems, how do you translate a problem into the emotional needs of your customers, and then what's the need that you can fulfill for your customer, and what's the payoff when the customer buys your product or service. So it really puts us in a role of fulfilling the needs of our customers and not just schlocking another couple of units or a laser procedure because that's what we've got on special this month.
Right. Well put. But it sounds to me that you're a student of the game more so than most. Meaning you have, someone, when they start a medical spa, I want to talk about this with your background. They start a medical spa. Sometimes it's it's a doctor or it's a PA, a nurse, MP, whatever. And they're excited because they can be a great injector and they can fire lasers and do all the things you need to do. But sometimes what's missing is there's not a lot of training available for folks who want to become better marketers, who would even understand the concept of market research or marketing research and appealing to them. So talk about how your role in the med spa transitioned from 2006, 2 years before the last freaking massive problem in the world that we had, that you managed through, and how your role in view of what we're talking about has changed from 2006 to 2020 and how you've applied that.
Sure, absolutely. So first, let me give Candela a plug since they're our sponsor. I'm here because they sponsor activities like this, so they recognize the value of what we're talking about today, and that's one of the reasons I'm a KOL for them. So they definitely see that they want to make their practices successful. That some of the things that we are talking about are very important to have a successful practice. And then I'll go back more specifically to your question. I think what I've been forced to go through is kind of this maturation process. When I opened in 2006, I was probably like a lot of your listeners. I was very day-to-day learning all the lasers and learning all the injectables and, learning parameters and really kind of in the trenches on the clinical side. Now, I'm not a provider. I don't have a medical background, but I've got nurse practitioners, and I was really, I was kind of the expert on the services from a non-clinical perspective, but I really knew that very well. And what I noticed as time went on is my marketing was not keeping up with my clinical skills. So I've always been very proud of the services that we deliver to our customers. I think we've got great products and we've got great devices. But you can be the best provider in the world, and if you can't get your marketing message out there to people, you're going to fail. And we could have a whole session on this one, but I think in many cases, and I've seen it, is that a physician or a nurse will get tired of the hospital environment or the healthcare business, and they'll get into the med spa space or the cosmetic space, and they think because they are really smart and great at what they do that the phones are going to ring. And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And that is the maturation process that I've gone through between 2006 and today, where I spend as much or more of my time on effectively communicating our services and training my team on how do we take these very complex services that, behind the scenes, they're very complex, but we got to simplify them and then translate them into a benefit for our customer that meets our particular customer's needs at that point in time.
I think you're absolutely right. And you said something interesting, how you didn't have, if I got that right, you don't have a clinical background, correct?
I do not.
So do you think that's an advantage in today's day and age, having no clinical background? In other words, your bent was a little different when you came in because you had business aspirations and then caught up on the clinical. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, it's absolutely fair. Before I got into this business, I worked in the cell phone business for a long time. I was one of the original people in the cell phone business. And when I was looking for a business opportunity, I know your listeners might not want to hear this, but I looked at the lack of business acumen and marketing acumen in this particular space as a benefit to me. I felt like I can hire great clinical folks, but it's very difficult to hire great marketing folks like you guys.
Right.
And I thought it was a competitive advantage for me to have the sales and marketing background and then work with great clinicians and providers to deliver the services to our customers.
Now, where obviously you are up to date and current. Is there any place on the internet that you've done outside of podcasts and stuff that you've done any type of training, education, either through Candela that folks could find? Part one. Part two is where do you go for your on continuing education? You mentioned a new model of consumer decision making. I definitely recommend, and I'm going to check that out from the Australian group. You mentioned spin selling, which sounds like a cool book, and I'm going to check that out. Where do you go to get your most up-to-date current information that you're applying in real life?
I'm just a huge research, and I read all the time, and I don't think there's any one source that's been better than others. I'll give Candela another plug. Candela has got some great resources on their website. The webinars they've done and the research they've got on there is excellent. One of the things I think about a lot when I think about how I want to improve my business is they did some market research on consumer awareness of energy-based devices, and it just highlights the lack of, or I'll call it the opportunity we have to increase the effectiveness of our communication, because they show you the data that says you've got customers that are coming in your door right now that they'd buy a laser service from you if you would just tell them. So I look at things like that on the vendor websites. I use an application called Flipboard. I'm not sure how popular Flipboard is, but I get specialized electronic magazines about different products and services.
Yeah.
But
you're making me feel bad about myself right now, right?
Well, it may be towards the unhealthy end. You might not want to be like me.
I'm like, yeah, I watched 3 episodes of my favorite show on Netflix last night.
Well, I mean, our business is so fantastic. I just love our business, and I could learn stuff about the cosmetic space and marketing all day long. I mean, it's really enjoyable, and it's like it's a game you'll never master, right? You will never know everything there is about our products and services or marketing. It's just never ending.
And I can tell just by obviously talking to you that you're very comfortable with this subject matter, and I think that speaks volumes. And so, going back, so you've been at it 14 years. How are you coming out of COVID now, and how are your customers responding to some changes in, there might be some logistical changes in the practice, and how is your team doing? Are they doing all right?
Yeah, really good. I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised. I was actually quite nervous when we reopened. A big concern was, will the government shut us down again? Big concern was, will we have a big influx of COVID cases and have to shut down because of that? But I think in the big scheme of things, the worry about COVID is rapidly declining. I mean, I think everyone still takes it seriously and realizes that, it can definitely be a life-threatening disease. But at some point, we've got to continue to live our lives. I mean, that's why we're here. So I think we're seeing a change in the marketplace right now. I mean, we had a really good month last month. Great start, even though it's only a couple days today. So I think that we're on our way out of this issue, particularly if the vaccine hits this year, which I think because of the politics, there's going to be a lot of pressure to have the vaccine hit.
Yep.
So I see nothing but a bright future for everyone right now.
Wow, that's super encouraging. And I think I say this constantly on the program. We need to, while being mindful and respectful, that this is a real thing. Nobody's saying that it's not, and it's been brutal. It really has been tough. And to your point, Warren, about just getting closed was tough, And so, but despite that tough stuff, in talking with people like you, there is a sense of excitement, I feel like, in certain people. And I think it'd be great if the world opens up a little bit, people can feel comfortable traveling a little bit more. Love to get back to shows. Obviously, we've been missing that now for 7 months. But we've got to have some positivity out in the marketplace. And I just love having people like you on the program, because it does, for folks who listen, maybe they're not in the same space mentally, right? And they got beat up a little bit, and it's been tough. But you just got to get up every day and keep applying yourself. And to Warren's point, you've got to do some reading, you've got to pay attention, and you've got to be a student of the game. So how do I grow my med spa the way maybe a year ago is a little different than it is now? And we've all got to get educated on what the new playing field looks like post-COVID. And It sounds to me like you've probably got a pretty good handle on that, as always. So before we break down, what's your thoughts on, so we're at what, September 3rd? What's your thoughts on the last 4 months of the year? How are you feeling about it? And anything coming out for Spa 35?
Well, I'm really positive. I think, as I said, I think, the election is kind of having a drag on all of this right now. There's, a lot of angst and conflict between what's going on. And as we transition into having the election behind us, I think people are going to get more into the day-to-day, how do I have a great life going forward? And, we're in a great industry because as people change how they work, I mean, we're still in this Zoom world, and we're still in a world where we're going to have remote workers, I think, for a long time to come. Is that we're in a great space to help our customers. So I think things are going, the only way things are going to go is up.
Wow. Well, with that said, that is absolutely great advice. And if anybody has a question, Warren, is it okay if they shoot you an email, if they listen to the program and say, hey, you said this, can you clarify more? Would that be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So if they go to my website, some of the things we talked about, I've got a page for beautiful eyes. And that's kind of how I see the vision of my marketing going forward, is kind of comprehensive treatment plans for customers. So they can look at that. They can drop an email at warren@spa35.com. That's the numbers 3 and 5. Happy to answer any emails that people forgot.
I really, really appreciate, Warren, as always, and like I asked you a couple months ago, keep those ideas coming. We would love to have you be a regular contributor on the program. I think what you have to say is sober-minded in that you understand the marketplace, but it's based on data, it's based on research, it's based on effort, and I think all those are good life lessons for folks to take from this. So feel free, guys, to reach out to Warren. Want to thank Candela, again, the leading U.S.-based medical aesthetic device company. Also want to thank Crystal Clear. Anyone who's interested in learning more about Crystal Clear, please stop by the website. We understand that the marketplace has changed a little bit, and we have reflected that in the pricing of our services, in addition to adding new features and functionality. Check out crystalcleardm.com in the calendar month of September. We're actually building big, beautiful websites free for folks who sign up and become customers. So check that out. Warren, once again, thank you so much for taking the time today. Thank you to our listeners, and we look forward to speaking with you again next week.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of True to Form, brought to you by Candela, a leading U.S.-based global medical aesthetic device company, engineering technology that enables practices to provide advanced solutions for a broad range of medical aesthetic applications. To learn more about this week's podcast sponsor, visit candelamedical.com. And to learn more about your podcast provider, Crystal Clear, visit crystalcleardm.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show on all your favorite music apps, including iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and TuneIn to stay up to date with the newest episodes. Thank you for listening.